Voices amongst the static. A glitch in the simulation. A broadcast with no origin. You have found the Phenomenuts podcast. Hello, you clusters of cosmic materials. You've tuned into the Phenomenuts, a bi-monthly podcast where we look at the weird, wonderful, and mysterious happenstances of this and occasionally other universes. Your hosts on this wild ride are myself, D. Barnes, the omnipotent Amber Hall,
Oh, bon howdy.
and the enigmatic Oscar Boardman.
Ahoy hoy.
Don't forget, we are on Spotify, iTunes, YouTube, and Transistor, so please give us a like, follow, share, comment, download, whatever's easiest. We love hearing from you fine folks. Alrighty, admin out of the way. How is everybody doing this lovely afternoon?
Don't ask.
And you, Oscar?
Yeah, I'm fine. You can ask.
Alrighty, I'm just gonna spin the wheel and get us started because that silence was completely unbearable.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm alright, by the way. I was only joking.
Oh, good. I'm glad. Oscar, you're up first.
Oh, it's me.
It's you.
It's back to me, and we're back in space. Yeah, that's right. Welcome back to the Phenomenuts Aeronautical Space and Time Administration. You brave, brave souls.
Fantastic.
It's already hard enough to survive in space, you know, with the lack of breathable gas, atmosphere, it's freezing, cramped. Well, we're working on that, please don't leave. But the good news is we have made some progress in other areas. You know that whole radiation thing? Well,
Yeah.
well, it seems we might be able to get a bit of help from a fungi. You see, the truffle with space is all that radiation. You know, with all the lives at stake, there's not mushroom for error.
Oh my god, you're really going for it.
Can you guess what I'm going to be talking about this week? It's
Is it water?
It's not water, no. It is mushrooms. I'm talking about mushrooms. I do apologise. I'll stop making puns now. It's just I have spore impulse control. So, what could mushrooms bring to our totally legitimate and not at all underfunded space agency? Well, see, these aren't just normal mushrooms. These aren't your run-of-the-mill mushrooms you'll find in the garden. No, these are super mushrooms, you see. Given superpowers by radiation? Question mark?
Oh.
Discovered in 1991 inside and around Chernobyl nuclear power plant. You may have heard of Chernobyl. People don't live there now. Lots of radiation means it's not a very particularly nice place to hang around, unless
loads
maybe
of fun guys live there.
yeah, they're I love this term, extremophiles.
Yeah.
Which means they just love like unlivable places. But these are they're called radiotropic fungi, and they're mushrooms that can not only survive the high radiation but thrive off of it as well.
Wow.
In a process that has been termed radiosynthesis, which is thought to be similar to anaerobic respiration, which is something you may know more about than me, Amber.
Yeah, it's because normally you breathe in and you're running or something, and then you breathe in harder, and then your muscles start to burn. It's because you can't get enough oxygen in, so you start doing inefficient, bad respiration.
Well,
so anaerobic is not so good, and it only works when there's no oxygen.
Well, these mushrooms love it. That's like their main source. They don't do the whole oxygen thing. They love slurping up all this stuff that we hate and, you know, turning it into mushrooms.
Thank you.
I know. What fantastic team players. So they turn this radiation into a delicious, healthy snack for themselves. We're not 100% sure quite how it works, if it's step by step like photosynthesis, or if it's just one overall process. Either way, it's pretty cool.
It sounds nuts.
Yeah, back to space. A rival space agency who shan't be named, but I'll give you a hint. It rhymes with schmasser. They did some experiments on their International Space Station to see if certain radiotropic fungi could be useful in blocking ionizing radiation over a 30-day period. So just to see, if it could be used in space travel. And the results were pretty promising. They showed that there was a direct correlation between the amount of radiation deflected and the amount of mushrooms present, with significant amounts of ionizing radiation being reduced. So that sounds pretty good.
Yeah.
So it deflects 5 times as much radiation as the control group they did. So no shielding, mushrooms. Mushrooms, amazing. Much better than the alternative.
That's like
Mushroom
a significant improve.
Yeah. Let's see. They used the data they gained, because it was only 30 days they did this testing on the space station. That if they made a 21 centimeter thick shield out of said fungi, they could block the annual amount of radiation you would receive on the surface of Mars.
Oh, damn.
So one of the biggest problems with Mars is that it doesn't have this sort of protection from space radiation, not like Earth. But mushrooms on Mars, maybe.
Yeah, they'd love that, wouldn't they?
Big mushroom dome on Mars.
They don't need the oxygen. They could just chill out on Mars.
Gosh, anaerobic, eats radiation. That's just like Mars.
Fantastic. So the thing is, they're not sure at the moment for spacefaring vessels. So putting it on the outside of their spacecrafts, in theory, it could work. The only issue is mushrooms still have weight, and the stuff you would use to grow the mushrooms also has weight, which is that's like the equivalent of money in space travel. Because if it's over a certain weight threshold, they'd have to send up a whole separate rocket, which is like double the cost of going into space.
Well, yeah, I mean, that price is coming down, but you're right. It's every single kilogram they've got to thoroughly justify having it.
Which is why I truly think we need to build a space elevator. I'd even, think we could build it in my back garden, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I've got some ladders.
Just throwing it out there.
Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, so space mushrooms. The future,
I like
perhaps.
that. Because that's the sort of, 21st century, or, the last 300 years since the Industrial Revolution, it's all machinery. We're getting to the information age. Technological advancement is running away rampant. But there's things in nature that we don't need to design from scratch. They're already doing what we want. So all it would take is for us to co-opt it and be sort of symbiotic with choice organisms or biotechnologically altered organisms. We already have E. coli making insulin and stuff like that. We're already doing this kind of stuff. We've been brewing beer for as long as we can remember. Just having a mushroom-covered spaceship, that seems.
Yeah,
I'm
you know
totally
what I
down.
think. Let's invite mushrooms to join us on our evolutionary path. I mean, they gave us penicillin, right? That's
they did, yes.
That's pretty handy.
I am all down for our new fungal overlords.
Yeah. And the weird thing is because fungi are as evolved as animals are. but we don't see them that way because they're stationary and things, but they can do stuff like a tiny little microscopic, like indent in some rock, and they can push a hyphae into the rock, like directly through rock, like a drill, just with the pressure inside of their cells. So maybe that would be a problem for the spaceship, because if you have a tiny little scrape somewhere, the fungi might just go, ooh, that looks like a good place to grow, and just punch a hole through the spaceship. So
yes.
Maybe that's something to watch out for.
Yeah, spores in confined spaces as well are a bit of a nightmare, I imagine.
We go to visit the Martian people, and we're like, how's it going? And they're just like, just like half mushroom, some kind of like clicking action going on. Last of Us.
We can't go to Mars anymore.
Mars is haunted. No, I like that. That's totally in my wheelhouse. That I like that.
I take it. I was going to say, do people want me to spin the wheel again? I take it.
Yeah.
All right.
Spinning the wheel.
Spinning that wheel. It's going around. I'm up next. Hit me.
Hit it.
Before I go off on one, let's have a quick word from our sponsors.
Initializing universal simulation. You have unsaved sessions.
What would you do in the event of a zombie apocalypse?
What if vampires lived among us?
Can society survive without electricity?
Would you like to start a new session?
Yes, please.
Rendering complete.
Do you enjoy exploring hypothetical, world-changing scenarios with some added humor from three nerds?
Utilizing the most advanced supercomputer in the universe, the human brain.
Then join us on the Trialogue, where we run the simulations so you don't have to. You can find us on Spotify, iTunes, and Transistor, and on Twitter at @the_Trialogue.
And wasn't that lovely? I don't know why I switched into such a pleasant radio voice there for a moment.
Professional.
I know, right? It was all ASMR-y.
The unexpected item in the bagging area.
That's just what I was thinking in my head.
Yeah.
There's an unexpected item in the bagging area. So this week, I thought I'd explain something that was way, way out of my realm of knowledge because, frankly, I thought it sounded cool. And I hear it as a term that's used in a lot of sci-fi stuff, yet I have no idea what it actually is, so I thought, well, it's probably about time I tried to figure out what the hell antimatter is. So let's have antimatter for dummies.
Let's do it.
I'm the dummy. Dummy thick, that is. But I will. God damn it! I made myself laugh.
I'm trying to investigate matter, but I'm dummy.
Yeah, I'm going to try and keep this digestible and very light. So it's sort of, very much just a light summary of the topic. There's a lot more of stuff in depth. It's really cool. Definitely recommend checking out my sources if you're interested. But yeah. So I thought, well, how do I start with something so alien to me? Because I'm going to actually have to do a learn. And I thought, well, what is it? Just strip it right down. What the heck is antimatter?
Yeah.
So I was like, well, okay. So definition is matter composed of antiparticles that correspond to normal matter. Which,
Okay.
Let's break that down a little bit further, because even that in itself is a bit sciencey-wincy. An antiparticle is a particle that has the same mass as a normal particle, but with opposite charges. That sounds pretty reasonable, yeah?
So like an electron has a charge, so it'd be like the opposite charge. So like how you have a plus and a minus.
Yes, exactly. Pretty much exactly that. And that sort of kind of covers the concept, because antimatter is basically matter that's composed of these antiparticles.
Okay.
It's a conglomeration of antiparticles.
Okay.
Okay. Everyone with me so far?
Yeah.
Cool. If at any point anyone falls off the knowledge train, let me know and I'll see if I can re-rail us.
Okay.
So, then I thought, well, what does it do? Because, if that's what it is, that's cool, but what would you use it for? What does it do? Because whenever it comes up in sci-fi, it's always like, the antimatter engines or weapons or power source. It got me thinking maybe there's probably some kind of use to it if it's, was harnessed properly, or, some kind of matter-antimatter reaction like you hear of in Star Trek.
Yeah.
Well, when a standard particle collides with its antiparticle doppelganger, side note, great band name, it does something pretty interesting. They undergo what is called mutual annihilation, which is exactly as cool as it sounds.
Wasn't that in the Cold War?
So the total energy and momentum of the pair are conserved and redistributed amongst the resultant particles, basically.
Okay.
Yeah. And this process actually produces intense gamma ray photons, which are a type of ionizing radiation, which obviously can do a lot of damage to us biologicals, but it's incredibly useful for things like, nuclear power, for example. Alongside this, neutrinos are also generated, which, put simply, particles with an incredibly small mass, and they're electrically neutral.
They're just flying around everywhere, but they barely touch anything else. So
they're created by radioactive decay, such as, for example, in a supernova or a nuclear reactor. Lastly, the mutual annihilation process creates smaller particle-antiparticle pairs. And the majority of the energy that comes out of the annihilation is in the form of, ionizing radiation, which is absorbed and converted by surrounding matter, typically into heat or light.
Okay.
And now I get to feel really sciencey for a second when I say that the amount of energy released is usually proportional to the total mass of the collision of matter and antimatter, in accordance with the mass-energy equivalence equation.
Oh my
or
God.
to put it simply, E equals mc squared.
Yes!
Thank you, Wikipedia.
We've done it. We've completed science.
I was like, oh my God, I get to say the fancy big words.
And it's not just for the sake of it. That's true.
Exactly.
So it's like if an electron, and I think it's called a positron, the opposite, if they annihilate, they hit each other and they got the exact opposite mass and the exact opposite spin and the exact opposite everything. So it just cancels out and there's no particle, and the weight of both of them is turned into energy.
Yeah, they basically get transmuted into something new entirely that, shares the same mass and momentum. And that reaction in itself has a creates a bunch of other stuff.
But there's a discrepancy in mass, and that is because the mass was converted into energy. The whole matter and energy can't be destroyed, they just change from one form to another.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like we've done a reaction, we've cancelled out, and there's some stuff gets thrown out.
Yeah.
But all the extra is just energy, just 100% energy.
Pretty much, yeah. You've kind of nailed it.
Okay.
Or at least to my understanding, that sounds right. I've been wrong before. So are we all still on board the brain train here?
I think I am. I'm feeling very smarty right now.
Cool. So then I was thinking, does that mean, is there an antiparticle for everything? Is there some sort of weird mirror dimension where, there's the particles that make up our dimension and there's all the antiparticles that are in the anti-dimension? And to put simply, no, there isn't. The most evidence strongly suggests that the observable universe is composed pretty much entirely of, your bog standard ordinary matter.
That's what we call it here in the antimatter universe. They call it matter.
Well, this asymmetry is apparently one of the greatest unsolved problems in physics. So I'm not even going to try and decipher that because, last time I touched physics was high school, and that's probably about 6 years ago. And I know that at that level they kind of teach you, lies.
Nothing. Yeah. Well, no offense or anything. I think you are very savvy. You're quick. You're smart. But this is something that all scientists around the world have been slaving at for years and have gotten no headway on.
The big brains with doctorates have tackled that one and not managed to come up trumps, so I ain't even going to attempt it.
It's like if you said 1 minus 1 is 0, and you keep doing it, and then one time 1 minus 1 isn't 0, it's like 0.00001, and you go, wait, what? That's not how maths works. And someone has to work out what's wrong with maths.
Yeah.
So the inequality itself is actually called baryogenesis, which I thought was a very fancy sounding word.
Ooh, another good band name.
Oh yeah, no, I hadn't thought of that one. And this kind of this led me on to thinking about, okay, so I kind of get what it is, I kind of get how it is, and what it do, but what can we use it for? Like, what's the practicality of it? Why does it keep coming up in, sci-fi and stuff like that?
Yeah.
So the what I was thinking at the time was that maybe if safely contained, it maybe be a good power source. And it has actually a pretty interesting variety of applications. So one was that it could be used in the treatment of cancers. There is similar forms of radiation being used effectively.
Okay.
Already, that would be similar types of treatments if we had access to antimatter.
Yeah, because they fire like a beam of radiation through you at two different angles, and where they converge, the radiation is large enough that it just kills off cells, so you can just basically catch a tumor in the crossfire and just burn it out.
Yep. So it could be utilized as a fuel source for interplanetary travel or stellar travel. As the higher energy density it has a higher energy density than conventional fuels, which would lead to a higher thrust to weight ratio than the conventional spacecraft we have now. If we can get around the teething issues of harnessing antimatter.
Whenever it bumps into anything, it disappears.
Lastly,
and blows you up at the same time.
Lastly, it could also be weaponized, but I've just literally written groan in my notes because I'm not even going to go there because what's the fucking point?
Don't do it.
I'm just going to say, why the fuck would you want to weaponize this thing that could be useful in any other context than being a weapon? Shut the fuck up and go away.
Look, surely we can all agree.
Go
on, Oscar, you're all right.
No, I was just going to say, what part of mutually assured annihilation do they not understand?
But yeah, I think we can agree that it's got some applications. Am I right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Definitely.
Yeah. And that's just to cover what we think we could do with it. I'm sure a lot more would come about if we had ready access to it and could use it. So this all kind of funneled me into my last sort of segment, which was okay. So where the hell do we get some?
Yeah, where's it hanging out?
Like where it be? And well, I found out there's likely a large amount out in space. Apparently, there's a giant cloud of it surrounding the galactic center.
Oh goodness!
Antiparticles are created wherever high energy particle collisions take place. So another really good example is cosmic rays hitting the Earth's atmosphere. Which produce, relatively small, which actually produces a relatively small amount of particle jets, which in turn get immediately annihilated when they hit nearby matter.
I'm
which
just
also is very
imagining
sciencey,
scientists in hot air balloons with big nets just trying to grab the antiparticles to bring them back to the lab.
It's also thought that there's probably a large amount in faraway galaxies due to cosmic inflation in the primordial time of the universe, which I understand as the expansion of space, way back when, just after the Big Bang.
So inflation was a period of an amount of inflation of the universe that has never been seen before or since, where it went from a billionth of a meter across to several thousand kilometers across in less than a millionth of a second or something like that. It was just insane. So yeah, that a lot of weird things happened then.
Yeah. And it could hypothetically be assembled in, kind of right now it seems. But no macroscopic, so that means visible with the naked eye, amount has ever been assembled, just because of the extreme cost and difficulty in the production of it and then handling it safely.
Yeah. You'd have to have it in a vacuum. How do you keep it from touching the walls of where you're keeping it?
The gist I got from what I've read is that, if we can find a good enough use for it, then we can synthesize it, but it's finding the use before actually having the output, if you get me.
Why invest the time and effort?
It's justifying the investment,
which
is obviously incredibly difficult to do, because you would think you would... Well, I need an egg to sell you an egg.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Like, well, what can you cook with it? And you go, well, I've never cooked with an egg before. Would you mind lending me one so that I can test and just try stuff? And they're like, no, you have to justify it first before I let you try anything.
Because capitalism's crap like that.
Ha ha ha.
But yeah, that's kind of that's all they wrote. Antimatter could be really handy once we figure out how to make it and handle it effectively. And hopefully now, to yourselves and anyone listening, it just makes a little bit more sense. And again, I will say I have barely scratched the surface with this one, and it is really interesting and really fascinating. And I do think I might try and pick it up again in the future.
Yeah.
But if you are interested, it's so worth a read, because I think even just trying to figure out what antimatter was and its uses alone, I think I read about, let me just scroll down, 8 different articles.
Wow.
Yeah.
I was on set. I think I had 8 different Wikipedia pages open at once, because I was like, okay, I need to read this, but then I also need to go off and explain this, and it was really, really interesting. And it's nice to kind of get the techno babble in Star Trek now, where it's like, okay, well, at least if someone mentions antimatter, they're probably doing one of 3 things, which is something in medical, something to do with a power source, or a weapon. And barring the last one, I'm pretty interested. It's always pretty cool.
Yeah. I kind of like that. 8 different Wikipedia articles.
Oh, you should have...
Wikipedia Overdrive.
So, right, the thing is, I've got my desktop, which, has 2 screens, and I always think, I should sit at my desktop and work, because then I can have my research on one screen and my typing on the other. And I never do, because I'm an idiot. So I'll do it on my Mac, which is like this very small screen. So I end up with half a screen that is my text document, half a screen that is my browser, but that's half a screen that's my browser also has about several tabs open at once that I'm just constantly flicking through.
I remember uni.
Yeah, basically.
So I don't know if either of you have seen this movie. It's the sequel to The Da Vinci Code, featuring Tom Hanks.
Angels and Demons, was it?
Angels and Demons, which, as a quick summary without giving too much away, because it's one of those kind of movies, Tom Hanks has been summoned to the Vatican because terrorists are threatening the Vatican with antimatter they stole from CERN. And he needs to gain the help of Ewan McGregor, who is a high cardinal, to save the day. But it's the very start of the film is this antimatter gets stolen from CERN, and it's in like this anti-gravity container, and the whole film is like, we need to solve all of these ancient riddles, otherwise they'll blow up the city with antimatter.
That's pretty out there. I mean, have the scientists thought about maybe solving a bunch of ancient riddles to see what we can do with antimatter?
I'm just so... Hey, the moment you started talking about certain bits about this antimatter, I was like, wait a second. And my brain just unlocked that memory for me.
Oh my goodness. I think it's crazy that, saying... using it as a weapon, all it would require is that you just pop the lid off the containment.
Yeah,
and if there's a sufficient amount, it'll blow up like a nuclear bomb.
Well, it was actually one thing that was mentioned when I was reading about it, and I didn't go into it too much because there's a lot of things that I've read and gone, you know what, that has just gone right over the top of my head, and I don't feel comfortable, trying to explain it to an audience because I don't want to accidentally misinform. But one of the things that came up was just that it's incredibly hard to sort of manage an antimatter reaction in terms of it just fires those photons off really fucking wildly to some extent. It's one of the reasons that it has a few issues in using it as a fuel source is that it's really hard to direct it.
Yeah.
It was one of the biggest issues that came up. Again, this is one of the things I opted not to put in to the script for fear of, not wanting to get it too wrong or sort of bastardize the point a little bit too much.
Right.
Do you think anybody listening to this podcast plans to commit antimatter crimes now?
I know, we're going to be fucking in court over this. Oh, goodness.
One thing that got me when I was writing it was just like, I think I wrote originally in the first draft that like, oh, it can be weaponized, and then I just typed ugh, and I was like, yeah, I don't even want to talk about it being used as a weapon because I think it's such a crap way to. So many people talk about things like this and paint it like it's some kind of benefit when it's like, no, that's the downside.
Yeah, you know, the reason why we don't let people, like new people, get in on making nuclear weapons and why we don't use them is because we realize that we've gone too far, but we can't get rid of the weapons because if you do and someone else doesn't, then they have them. But if we all agreed to get rid of them, they'd be gone and no one would make any more because everyone would be watching. So why invent a new technology and then start making weapons with it if you know they will never be able to be used? Just stop it before you even begin. The thing is, as well,
is I get that some people would always try and play the point of, oh, well, it's going to get weaponized whether you like it or not. I'm like, yeah, cool. I can just not put any attention to that.
Yeah, like why? What?
I can just not go in that direction at all because the reality of it is, I think that, you know, the fact that we have to even consider this is really upsetting. Like the fact that the discussion even has to be had of, oh, can you weaponize it? It just makes me want to. It makes me want to just cry. It makes me want to weep because it's like it's really deeply upsetting that some people hear about this really interesting sciencey stuff and go, how can we make a weapon out of it? And I'm like, how fucking limited is your scope? We could just make everyone have a better life.
I just told you infinite energy, space travel, you know, cure cancer, and you're like, yeah, but how could we fucking kill each other with it? Like, what's wrong with you? Well, to be honest, there's not something wrong with this person who's bringing up how do you weaponize it. It's the fact that they are kind of right. Someone will weaponize it. What the fuck's wrong with people in general?
You don't see the mushrooms doing this. They're all cooperative.
You know, maybe we should just fucking blow ourselves out the airlock and just send the spaceship on just with the mushrooms. They'll colonize Mars. They get to keep Mars. It's fine.
They earned it. We didn't.
It's like if you said, wow, now we can use genetic engineering to bring back extinct, you know, species that we've hunted to extinction. These rhinos, these beautiful birds of paradise and all these that have gone extinct. We can bring them back and someone's like, yeah, but could we not like genetically enhance a soldier so that they can kill 50 people and go on a rampage? I'm like, what?
Oh, literally the Jurassic Park films where it's like, we can bring back dinosaurs. And then the later ones, they're like, but what if we put dinosaurs in the army?
Yep. Yeah.
Like, it's like, why? Why would why?
It's like creating some kind of like, I don't know, memory foam pillow bomb that fires memory foam pillows at a terminal velocity that like breaks you in half. And I'm like, it's a pillow. What are you playing at?
Gosh.
Yeah, God's dead. We have killed him.
Yeah.
I guess that's my cue.
It is.
Don't we need to spin the wheel?
I don't think we need to spin the wheel when there's only one name left.
You know what? I'm not going to let you spin the wheel. I'm taking control of this right now. I'm just going to add a quick point onto that last bit, D, as well, because I just looked it up. So, if you take 1 gram of antimatter and just let it react with 1 half gram of antimatter reacting with 1/2 gram of ordinary matter, results in 21.5 kilotons of TNT equivalent explosion, which is
you can see how
that
would be
half a
very
gram. If you just pop the lid off 1/2 gram of antimatter, it would be half the strength of the Hiroshima atomic bomb.
And you can see how if we had a way of containing and harnessing that could be, to be honest, to put it simply, pretty fucking revolutionary to, you know, how we exist.
Yep. Like,
it does provide a very... There's a hell of a lot you could do with that.
Yeah. It's exciting stuff. And to be honest, technological advancement has this way of just kind of surprising you and running away with itself. So I eagerly watch the headlines. Okay, so I'm going to start my segment today with a quote. I looked down and I could see Dr. G. I saw him run around the bottom end of the delivery bed. He must have forgotten a bucket that was there because I saw him kick it in his haste to get around to the other side. And he kicked this bucket and it knocked into a trolley with all the instruments on bowls, etc. You could see things falling off it, and then came running to me on the left side, and I saw him thumping on my chest. Thumping and thumping. That is a quote lifted from Death and Consciousness, a scientific study exploring the phenomenon of the near-death experience.
Oh.
Yeah, this is one we really should have touched on, and I'm glad to be doing it today. But to be honest, after all my research, I could definitely come back to this. There's much more than I'm going to talk about today. Consider this a primer. So, near-death experiences occur in about 10 to 20% of people who come close to death. They appear to have universal themes, like out-of-body experiences, like floating up above the body and seeing the room from another perspective, an overwhelming sense of peace, calm, or love, or warmth, this feeling of contentment, like no sorrow about having died. Bright lights, sort of dazzling bright lights, brighter than anything that is possible, even beings made of light. Passing through a tunnel or a passage, sort of like passing to the other side or something like that, going towards the light. Your life flashing before your eyes, and a sense, an awareness that you have died. Near-death experiences seem to happen anywhere, like regardless of culture, what your concept of death is. If you even have any prior knowledge of near-death experiences as a thing, whether you're religious or you're not religious, or any different religion, or even how old you are, like children who presumably who have not developed any cultural or social expectations about death or near-death experiences, report the same type of phenomenon as adults. So, there's plenty of ideas out there for what causes near-death experiences. A 2011 study explored the credibility of these sources. The sources are as follows: natural opiates, ketamine, temporal lobe stimulation, altered gases in the blood, REM intrusion, and that's like if they were predisposed to have sleep disruption, like sleep paralysis, physiological changes in the eye, personality factors, and expectations. The results of this study were inconclusive, so we could probably take a deep dive on any one of those suggestions, but I would rather focus on this next point. While all of these ideas sound very plausible, like we have endogenous opioids, like internal opioids. If you're basically flushed with heroin as you're about to die, you would probably feel peaceful. You'd probably feel warm. You might even feel like you're rising out of your body and all that sort of stuff. You may even see lights. But not all near-death experiences happen close to death. Some happen after death.
Ooh.
As in your heart has stopped, your EEG has showed your brain has flatlined. No brain activity. In some cases, people have demonstrated an awareness without any associated brain activity. The awareness during resuscitation study, or AWARE, details a patient that had a period of verifiable conscious awareness during a near-death experience when his brain was thought to have flatlined. So that tickled me a little bit, because it starts raising questions about where, like the source of consciousness. Because a lot of the papers that I was looking at do say perhaps there's something else going on. Perhaps we don't have the right idea of what's going on with consciousness. Because, I would love to explain near-death experiences completely, but the fact is, we don't know much definitively. Like I said, with that 2011 study, their results were inconclusive. They discussed each one. They talked about the merits of each theory and the fact that there's things that they don't explain. In fact, the suite of different effects that people experience cannot be comfortably described by any one of those things that they explored, or indeed any of the papers that I looked in. But that's not to say that everyone who has a near-death experience experiences every different sort of hallmark of it. In fact, there was one study where they suggested that if you get damage in the right hemisphere of your brain, if it's mainly in the right hemisphere, you get a certain subset of near-death experiences. Like, I can't remember which one was which, but like the right side would maybe give you lights and feeling like you'd met a presence and gone through a tunnel. And if you had the damage on your left side, left hemisphere, you would instead feel like you were floating out of your body and viewing your body from above and stuff like that. They haven't really been able to test that, but that is their working theory. And obviously there's a lot of scientists looking into this, especially since people get resuscitated so much now, which I always thought was interesting. Like, previous to looking this up, I thought, wouldn't we know about this? So many people have died in the past. Like, wouldn't we know about this? And then I realized that up until quite recently, when people die, they don't come back to tell you about what happened. But a lot of people can say that now. I know people who have been resuscitated who, without medical intervention, would have just died. And in the past, they would have died. So we stand in a unique position now where we're able to bring people back from this weird in-between. Like, they can even die for minutes and then be brought back and just get on with their lives. And, 10 to 20% of these people are recalling that they had strange experiences. So, it's something to look into, especially with the lack of brain activity. So, yeah, I mean, most survivors give their recollection, but unless, they were being monitored during the near-death experience, there's not much more they can give you apart from what they recall from the experience. At least one concrete thing that survivors have, though, is a change in mindset. Many survivors experience a change in personality and outlook, with the most common changes found to be a greater appreciation for life, higher self-esteem, greater compassion for others, less concern for acquiring material wealth, a heightened sense of purpose and self-understanding, desire to learn, elevated spirituality, greater ecological sensitivity and planetary concern, and a feeling of being more intuitive. So, I mean, we don't have the answers, per se, but it's nice to know that on the whole, these experiences give people something positive to take away afterwards. Which, I mean, is the least you can ask for. You just died. So, I feel a heightened sense of, purpose. And I'm like, well, that's good because you died just before. Now, while studies have found no correlation between prior religiousness and the occurrence of near-death experiences, so it wasn't that if you were religious before you were resuscitated, you're more likely to have a near-death experience. There's no correlation between, so just the same, there's no statistical difference. So even if you were, an atheist, you were the same rate of people would get a near-death experience. So they didn't find that sort of correlated, but near-death experiences tend to foster an internal sense of connection to the divine and to something greater than the self. So often people after one of these experiences don't necessarily get involved in organized religion, but do become more spiritual and feel like their connection to a sort of higher power is more of a personal one. And researchers think that that's probably because they've had this, they've come close to an unavoidable final point of their existence. And they've come back from it, so it's very humbling. And then also the fact that if they had an out-of-body experience, they start to believe that there's something more than just the body because they were outside of it. So, a lot of people tend to take that and become more spiritual afterwards. I think that's interesting. But if I may switch the focus for a minute to talk about another sort of related phenomenon that is known in some circles as the wave of death.
Ooh.
End-of-life electrical surges are characterized as a brief spike in brain activity shortly after death and have been recorded to happen anywhere between 180 seconds to 360 seconds after complete loss of measurable blood pressure. End-of-life electrical surges don't happen in every single person, though. First, patients that were brain dead before life support was stopped didn't show these surges. But even in all other patients, these surges only happened 50% of the time. So they think the signal may be caused by a discharge of the remaining neurons. So it's been proposed that some neurons hang on and maintain their electric charge, even though the blood pressure's dropped and they're not getting oxygen. They're kind of hanging in there, just trying to, they're waiting for the blood pressure to come back up so they can get back to work. So their potential just kind of stays, they hold on to it. So yeah, just for a time after the brain is starved of blood, they're just like, no, I'm going to hang in there. I can still be resuscitated almost. But yeah, these remaining neurons eventually, due to, they're cells, aren't they? So they just kind of, I'm not getting oxygen, and they die. So they just succumb, and there's a sort of massive intracellular influx of calcium, and they all discharge in a sort of cascade, which produces this signal as you get a sort of domino effect as the rest of the brain just shuts down. Another suggestion to this as well is that you would need a critical amount of neurons required to have this cascade. Hence the absence of, in brain death cases, and possibly explaining the not universal occurrence of this signal as well. So if someone doesn't have to be brain dead if they've had head trauma or if they've been starved of blood, but their organs were working, but the blood wasn't getting to their brain or something like that. It could have damaged the brain enough that even though, the EEG flatlines and there's no signal because the brain's already kind of discharged all of its potential. But that's the thing that happens. I mean, I'd like to add to that as well. So now I'm going to inform you about the results of another study. I'd love to call, but I won't call it. Why are scientists like this? In this study, they decapitated obsolete rats while monitoring their brainwaves.
Jesus fucking Christ.
So, Rain et al. Did all the dirty work, so you don't have to. Instead of waiting around for people to die in hospitals, they just went all Thanos and just started chopping. It's interesting that they actually used a guillotine. So they had a little rat-sized guillotine. Did they make that? Where'd they get that from? So yeah, why are scientists like this? The joke, how many fruit pastels does it take to choke a kestrel? Also, obsolete rats.
Yeah.
Man, if a rat just digs a hole and eats a bit of cheese, it's not obsolete. That's what rats do. It's doing its job. It's just being a rat.
That sounds like a symptom of capitalism to me.
Yeah, obsolete. You rats stopped making me money. I'm going to chop your heads off. Anyway, interestingly enough, in the rats, the same electric surge was detected. About 50 to 80 seconds after decapitation, a high-amplitude slow wave was observed. As the EEG signal before that spike had more power than the signal after that spike, they concluded that a mass discharge of the neurons was happening, which supports the other researchers. Now, while Chawla et al. Interpret the signal as a gamma brainwave, I had a look at it myself, and I reckon it's a delta brainwave. That's right. I've got nothing to back that up, but I looked at it and I went, I think that's a delta wave. So here's the implications of both options with regards to how it will feel after you die. If the qualified scientists who are published are right, then dying will be followed by a brief moment of meditative consciousness before fading away. And if I, the less qualified, unpublished, unemployed, undulating Ouroboros known as Amber, is right, then dying will be followed by a brief, dreamlike awareness before fading away. I mean, take your pick. I mean, both sound alright to me. Meditation, sleep, yeah, nice. Sure. So yeah.
Just take death, if I'm honest.
I'm like, yeah, it might be rubbish, but at least my last little... You know, like, if your last mouthful of a meal is bad, it ruins the whole meal. But if the last mouthful is nice, you might overlook some of the badness back in the start of the meal. So as long as that last little note is all right, I reckon I'll be at peace. So that's nice to know that we've got a little bit of science to say that it's not going to be so bad right at the end. Thanks for decapitating those rats. So yeah, thanks to the inconclusiveness of scientific inquiry so far, you might be thirsting for that dope-ass empirical evidence to shed some light on this whole near-death experience thing. Well, lucky you. It looks like in the next few years, the AWARE 2 study will be finished, which is going to be looking at up to 1,500 patients. So yeah, look out for that.
Are they going to decapitate obsolete patients?
Oh, yeah. You know, people unemployed, the poor. Funded by the government, you know.
Of course.
I know, I'm kind of upset because they were like, we just have to hang around and wait for people to die and then hopefully they get resuscitated. And I'm like, what a shame that you didn't wait a couple of years until this year and last year where there's just like millions of people dying everywhere. Could have got some real good data, but...
At what point do you ask the person dying if they consent to being a part of this study?
Nah, you just walk in and just whack the camera on, just stick some EEG stickers on their head. The doctor's like, get out of here, and you're like, I need to know. If he doesn't get out of your way, label him obsolete and decapitate him with a tiny rat guillotine. Yeah, but you know what's wild as well? I meant to research the so-called electromagnetic after effects, where near-death experience survivors claim they have light bulbs break when they go past, or electronics go haywire when they touch them. Even like months and years after they've had their experience. But I found it was all self-reported anecdotal data, so I didn't really have anything to cover. So, but I'd saved tabs about these after effects, and I went on them and I read them, and I was like, self-reported. Yeah, people vastly like skew the truth sometimes if you get them to self-report. So there's absolutely no actual credible scientific data about that at all. So I just couldn't be arsed looking into it. But yeah, some people will say, oh no, my watch keeps breaking after I was resuscitated. I'm like, oh, cool.
I'm pretty sure it's true. I think I saw it on an episode of The X-Files.
That's right. That makes it true. Moraldo is always right.
Yeah, it's just the government doesn't want you to know it's true.
And I would like to pick both of your brains, but first I'm just going to give my personal opinion on the matter. So my personal belief, and this is just my belief, is that near-death experiences are a subjective hallucination caused by one or a combination of the reasons that we've brought up. So this could even extend to sort of modification of the memory of the event after the fact. I don't believe anything supernatural is happening or anything that's like outside of science is happening. And I believe the mind just kind of fades away at death, maybe with a little increase in awareness momentarily before nothingness. I don't know that for sure. I'm not going to say that is what happens or I know that happens. That's just what I believe will happen. If you bring up more data, I'll update that belief. But despite that belief, I will probably still approach my death with, some amount of excitement just in case there is something beyond. So I'm going to be like, oh, here I go. I'm going to die. Gotta be ready, brace myself, because I might just get thrown out into some other dimension or something, and I want to be prepared. But what are you thinking about these near-death experiences?
Well, it's one of those where the thing is, it's hard to really scientifically take down this information accurately, because no matter who you ask, it's their own personal experience. So it isn't like a scientific, measurable piece of information. Yeah, and two, if you're dying, your brain's just like a giant meat computer. If it's like I'm slowly I'm having a cascade failure here, you could just have false information going around, because if it's all chemically stored, you just need the chemicals or the electricity to do the wrong thing.
Yeah.
And it'll interpret it in the wrong way.
Yeah, like you're convinced that dreams are real while you're asleep.
Yeah, so I believe that you could have a near-death experience that could be personal to you because it's your brain processing the information.
Oh, sure.
But I don't actually believe it's anything more than that. I think you might take a aspect of spirituality from this because it would be so personal. It's not going to be like, yeah, that was weird, but I think I got somebody else's near-death experience there.
Or I kind of feel like, if someone just went, I nearly died and I felt like I saw my life flash before my eyes, and afterwards I had a renewed sense of purpose. I'm like, there doesn't need to be anything supernatural about that. It's very humbling to almost die. Like, I know someone who almost died, and afterwards I was like, he's acting really weird. And it was just like, he kind of went, it just never sank in, but when it did, I was like, my God, I was almost dead. What am I doing with my life? I need to just do whatever I want. And I was like, yeah, that's normal, right?
Yeah. Mortality is one of those things where you can wrestle with it all day long and still not get your head around it.
The great equalizer.
I know that, having thought about this a few times, obviously not just now, I'm pretty on the side of, look, the human brain will do just about anything to rationalize the things that happens to it. It will really push the boat out, and as someone who has experienced, the brain trying to rationalize things that quite simply are just fucked, or just, not right, or, insert thing here, that leads me to believe that given the level of, the level in which we sort of cognitively override our own memories, feelings, and sensations, I think that it's just as likely that what happens upon death is very much the same thing if you do come back from that situation. I don't... Personally, from what I've heard, I feel that there is obviously some kind of, chemical... I mean, there is the chemical reaction upon death, and you do experience something. However, I don't... Obviously, there's no way of knowing whether it is cognizant something, but I don't think for 1 minute it would be the same between people. I think it's just it's a computer that is completely overloaded and misfiring. It's like you've clicked 1,000 tabs and you just wait. It's just waiting for which one's going to show up first. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's the whole... The brain is already not responding in this scenario. It's just going to throw something random at you. And if you survive it, you're probably going to sit there and go, oh, I think it means that, in the same way that a lot of the time you have a dream and you might try and psychoanalyze it.
Yeah.
And at that point, you're already kind of ascribing more meaning to it than it ever really had.
Yeah.
In the same way that if you, as someone who suffers with intrusive thoughts, like, if I think about that too much, it kind of, you start to try and rationalize such things. And it's like, do you get what I'm saying in terms of the human brain?
Kind
it's
of like,
very much,
I
it's
wasn't
designed...
even thinking that. The brain just made me think that.
It's designed to rationalize. We are designed to rationalize. And I think that regardless of what you experience in that short space of time, between in dying, the reality of it is you're probably going to I would think you would likely to be to override that experience entirely just by the simple euphoria of cheating death. Like, let's not forget
the relief.
Let's not forget in that situation, regardless of, your personal circumstance, you have survived the impossible.
It's crazy because for a lot of people, reporting their near-death experiences, they say they don't want to come back. They feel like they're being pulled back against their will and they want to stay dead.
And
which is crazy.
Like I said, I think it's likely a sort of some kind of big feeling and sensation, but I don't think there's any real, meaning to it. I think it, not to sound dismissive to people who have had that, if you ascribe that meaning to it, then that is, personal and belongs to you.
Oh, yeah, sure.
I just don't personally think it's anything in particular. I think my current thoughts on the matter is that it is the brain trying to rationalize an experience that cannot be rationalized because it is the supposed to be the last thing that happens to you.
Yeah. It doesn't have to make sense, but it got renewed for another season and it has to explain it.
Do you know what I mean? Like, it's such a... In a vacuum where, humans haven't come up with all this really cool shit, you would just die and stay dead.
Yep.
And the brain isn't really hardwired for the opposite of that to happen. It's not designed so that you die and you come back around. No, you just... And I think the reason people have these sort of, massive experiences is it is just trying to rationalize the impossible.
Yeah. Yeah, an experience that it cannot reconcile because nature has never allowed it to evolve to deal with it because it happens at the end.
You don't just not die when you die, you die. Do you know what I mean? Yeah, you're and it's cool to have survived death, but in the same regard, you still physically died. And the brain is not wired for you to do that. Like, it's not designed for you to come back from that.
Yeah.
So realistically, it's just a massive clusterfuck of chemicals in that scenario.
Yeah,
and of course you're going to try and rationalize it some way, because how the your brain, which is a biological computer, which is in many ways limitless, but in many ways completely limited, can only do so much. And in a situation that would never naturally occur, it's not wired to do so.
Yep.
It's not wired to come back to life. It does, and that's fucking sick. I'm so glad it does that. It's very cool that you can deal with that and reconcile that, but I couldn't think of any other justification other than it's just the brain trying to justify what just happened to it, which was something that it was never designed to withstand.
That is the brain's MO, you are right.
I guess my make or break question here is, can we weaponize it?
Yeah, we can carry enemy soldiers into the shadow realm. I'm going to just pop my tinfoil hat on for a second. I'm going to say, what if, because people haven't evolved to be able to comprehend these near-death experiences because no one ever dies and comes back, but they are doing today. We need to get people who've had a near-death experience and get them to have children. And the epigenetic changes following their near-death experience will be passed on to the children as genetic information. And if we have subsequent generations of people who have died and been resuscitated, we're going to end up with some, some shaman level, drifters, people who can just fade in and out of reality and stuff. Spirit walkers, I don't know. That's what we need. Cyborgs versus warlocks.
Bring it down.
So, since I opened with a quote from Death and Consciousness, I thought I would close on one from it as well. So, this is from the researchers themselves, and I very much kind of agree with the theme here. Thus, within a model of consciousness that assumes a causative relationship between cortical activity and consciousness, the occurrence of mental processes, memory, and the ability to accurately describe events when cerebral function is normally absent or at best severely impaired is perplexing and suggests alternative mechanisms may need to be considered. And I very much agree with that, because the only bit that stumped me was, how is that guy aware when his brain was flatlined?
Sorry. What's the for the less big brain of us? What did that mean?
It was basically within the model of consciousness is generated by the brain. If the brain is off, there's no consciousness.
Yeah.
Why have we got verifiable consciousness when this guy's brain was flatlined? We need to have another think about what consciousness is.
Right. That's what I was getting. I just thought I'd double check.
Yeah, no, it was very wordy. I read through it a couple of times and I was like, how am I need to work out the pacing of this because it sounds very wordy. But yeah, I am interested because, I'm very skeptical. I told you what my belief is, that there's nothing supernatural happening and the mind is generated by the brain. But it is weird that in those gaps of activity, it does kind of echo through and then pick back up afterwards, which is odd because there's nothing happening in the brain. So how's the consciousness? You know what I mean?
Oh, it dips into philosophy slightly. It's like, what is the consciousness? My brother's doing a psychology degree, and I remember talking to him about one of the things he was writing. And he told me he was doing a paper on, does consciousness exist in the universe, and if so, where?
Yeah, I like that.
From a science perspective of like physics, maths, chemistry, you can't mathematically solve things like that.
Yeah.
Not yet.
Well, the thing it keeps making me think of is so always in discussions like this is the thing of, so if you die and you come back, not to get too, I guess, philosophical, but did you actually die?
Yeah, because what is...
Yeah, you medically die.
Then?
Like, what is death? Is death the cessation of life and the non-continuation, or is death just the act of physically dying?
So this was a thing in all these papers. The reason why science is looking into this is not because it's a bunch of pseudoscientists trying to get published. These guys are researching when is it appropriate to harvest organs from people who have died on the table, because you have to get them as quick as possible to make sure they get to the people they're going to. But if we're showing brain activity after death, like minutes after death, and we're showing people being conscious even though their brain activity is gone, when is it appropriate to start slicing them open and ripping their organs out?
The thing is, though, it's a really important discussion because
we're
obviously
still looking into it.
Yeah, well, the thing is, it's like not to be very grim about it, but like organs for transplant donation are viable for only a very limited amount of hours after death.
If someone dies, you have to whip them out as quick as you can.
Yeah, it's not a process that can afford time wasted, but obviously you also can't reduce someone's loved one to a pile of organs.
A bag of organs, yeah.
You can't reduce a person to a pile of organs. You might, that's the reality of it, and he's treading that very fine line of, so we kind of need to know definitively where death is, where it starts, where it ends, when the body becomes a corpse, because
process, not a single moment.
Yeah, it's not just the absence of consciousness. Otherwise, we'd die every time we went to sleep, and we don't. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, but you can have the body die and then be pumped back into life, and the mind will continue, but the mind can stop when you get knocked out and come back, and your body's alive in the meantime. It even touches on that. People in vegetative states have been shown to be aware, even though their brain activity does not reflect conscious awareness. It reflects what we know as a vegetative state, where you're just completely unresponsive. Yet, if they flash pictures of their loved ones in front of their eyes, you see the parts of the brain light up that are involved in recognizing faces, so they are aware, but their brain does not show a pattern of awareness, which means we're not sure what being aware and conscious looks like on an EEG. So there's a lot of questions, and to be honest, the brain is a fantastic treasure trove of questions. I'm just going to keep my eye on the news, I suppose.
Yeah. It's interesting that it's your brain which is processing this information about the brain and how it works.
Yep.
I always think it's going to be a crying shame. I'm going to die, and as I'm dying, I'll go, all of a sudden realize, oh my God, that's the truth. But I'll never be able to share it as I have
Amber,
dead.
what was the quote? Was it the perils of the brain thinking about itself, or something to that caliber?
Yeah. It's like pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Like, how's the brain ever going to work out the mind deconstructing itself? There's got to be a point where it's not able to, right?
And is that the consciousness, perhaps?
No. Questions.
So, before we fall into another existential dread hole, let me shift us very nicely, a very clean segue into our last segment, where we talk about something we've been enjoying between recording sessions.
Yay.
I'm going to start us off because I'm selfish like that. Recently, I've been playing a small selection of video games as I don't have a ton of free time at the moment due to starting a new job. So I've kind of lined up a few games that I can, pick up and go back to when I've only got maybe an hour or two, or sometimes not even that, maybe even 45 minutes. So I was like, something I can just pick up and play whenever I've got a free minute. And the three I've settled on are, I'm even talking about three. I'm being really selfish this week. So the first one I had written down was Darkest Dungeon, which is a fun little turn-based RPG-style roguelike, which is quite hard but quite fun. It's that one's been very good to be able to pick up and put down.
Yeah.
Just because it like a lot of the little runs are quite short, but there's a lot of progression you can do in your sort of home base between going out and doing little missions and things like that. It's all about sort of damage mitigation and dealing with the worst case scenario, and it's interesting to play a game where the odds are you are going to lose someone on this mission, and who can you live without.
Damn.
Yeah, it really does not. It's very much look, this game is going to continually punish you, and you are just going to have to roll with it, and you are still going to have to try and make progression in the face of it.
Not my kind of game.
The second was the original Final Fantasy VII on Switch, which I'm having a lot of fun playing for the first time.
Very nice.
Really interesting because, obviously, I've said before, I often struggle with older games. I would class that game as before my time, as I was only born in 1998. And I've been having a lot of fun. I actually ended up playing the remake a little bit, and then was like, oh, actually, I want to see what the original was like, and I've been having a lot of fun with it so far. Really nice story, really cool setting. Absolutely fuck anyone who tries to claim that game isn't political, because they're just fucking wrong. They're just objectively wrong.
No politics in my video games.
No politics in my video games. This game that is, I think, maybe as old as me or something near that has, it has huge political elements running through it. So if you think video games aren't political, fuck off. And lastly, I've been replaying Pokemon Sword because I thought I'd actually get through the DLC. I got a long time ago and never got around to playing. And I just started a new run, and I was thinking of, I'm trying to do an all dark type team because I've never done any sort of non standard playthrough. So I thought, I was like, I've never done a, what's the one where if it dies, you just get rid of it.
Nuzlocke.
Yeah, I've not done Nuzlocke. I've not done anything like that before, and I thought, well, just to spice it up a little, I'll try and stick with one type and whatever subtypes there are, and was like going through the Pokedex, looking at types, and was like, oh, there's quite a few cool Pokemon I like in dark types. So let's try and do that.
Yeah. I always find that fun because it's restrictive, so you got to be dynamic. You got to have a clever team.
Yeah, but it's not too restrictive to the point where I have to put in a ton of thought and really dedicate a lot of time to it, which I can't do.
Well, yeah, I think Sword is good for that because it's quite easy to sort of make it easy for yourself if that's what you want to do. It's
been a lot of fun, and it's nice to have played through Sword and put something in that makes it just a little bit more challenging. So what have you two been enjoying?
Well, I'm going to talk about two things because you got to talk about three things. But then by those rules, Oscar can only talk about one thing. No, I'm not actually going to do that. The thing that I wanted to talk about that I've been enjoying, it's I guess it's a song by a YouTuber, Mark Ribellet. I think that's how it's pronounced. Ribellet? Ribellet? So he does like improv music. So he's got one of those those boards with the different buttons on, and you can assign them different like sounds, and You know, you can record loops and stuff, and you can sing over them and record more layers. And he'll basically do like streams and stuff where he'll like take calls from, you know, viewers, and he'll just chat with them, and then, you know, it'll be the end of the call, and then he'll just be like, yeah, you know, that person I was talking to just said they got a new job, and then he's like, I got a new job, and then he like makes a song about getting a new job and stuff, and he's very, very talented. But one of the songs, the reason why I'm bringing it up is he just had a song that was basically called Get Up, and it's basically just shouting at you to get out of bed. But the lyrics are so like fucking pumping, because he's got a bit of the like, get the fuck out of bed, bitch, go. Like, you know, just some of the hardcore stuff. And then he's like, when you're making excuses for what you are, when you're making excuses for your shit. And I'm like, oh, I feel awful. And then he's like, you got a heart, you got a brain, you got a dope ass mentality. You got this. I just want the best for you. And I'm just like, I can get out of bed. I can do it. But it also slaps. So the last 2 days I've leapt out of bed when I finally brought myself to it and just had a little dance. And it's a good way to start your day, I must say. But yeah, I would say check out his channel, Mark Riboulet. It'll probably autocorrect you if you start typing that in. But yeah, he's got some very good slapping songs, some funny jokes. He's very talented.
Lovely.
Noted.
I guess I'm going to go with... Just trying to work out which video game I've been enjoying. I'm going to go with Stellaris, you know.
I was going to say...
It's a slapper. I've been reinvigorated by the new DLC, Nemesis. Because it lets me fulfill my, you know, wildest fantasies and dreams. It says, hey, do you want to be the bad guy? And I'm like, yes, I do. I'm not a bad guy in real life, but given the opportunity to destroy stars and build a giant engine to rip the universe apart.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you know what, that's it. I like that option. I like the option to go, you know what? I'm out. I'm leaving. I'm the bad guy. Sure. You have to commit, you know, a couple of space war crimes. You need to, sometimes you'll land on a planet and you'll turn all the people into food, or maybe you'll just eat their literal cities. That's a fun one.
Oh.
Yeah, I've gone to a bit of a dark place in my recent playthroughs.
I know. I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. Haha. Oh, okay. Oscar, are you?
I'll eventually loop round to, you know, playing a good person in a video game to make myself.
Yeah,
you know,
I mean,
remind myself.
You can go from eating the whole city to just eating the rich. There you go.
Yeah, it's a lovely DLC actually, because some of the stuff that I haven't touched yet but look forward to are becoming the Senate in a Palpatine-esque way. I'm looking forward to, because you can sort of become in charge of the entire Galactic Council because of a crisis, and then when they say, right, we've dealt with that crisis, let's go back to the way it was, you can just turn around and say, I don't think so.
Oh god. So getting emergency powers permanently is there a way to learn this power?
You know what? I think you should vote for me to be in charge. I'm sure. I promise I'll be good and I'll give it back later.
Your political advisor's like, hey, tell them you love democracy.
So, yeah, that's what I've been playing. Stellaris is one of those games where you can't just sit down and play a game in one night.
Yeah.
It's like a week-long thing. But for something I can come in, sit down, play for a couple of hours, put down, you know, come back maybe 2 days later, it's fantastic.
You're going to have to teach me, because last night I was going to boot it up, but then I realised it was like 2 a.m. and I was like, nope, bad idea.
Yeah, honestly, you made a wise move putting that back down, because the amount of times I've started a game of Stellaris just a little bit too late, and then suddenly it's like 6 a.m. and I'm like, oh god, what have I done?
Like, if you start a game at 2 a.m, you're going to be there for at least 4 or 5 hours.
No. So I'm glad I held it off, but it's good because I'd like to pick your brains on some things, just because I want to go in there. I want to go in blind. I want to dive in the deep. I want to go skinny dipping in the world of Stellaris, and I could use a hand.
It's absolutely. It's one of those games where you can obviously play it to make the numbers go up, or you can play it to just like try and be really competitive. Or my absolute favourite is going in and sort of role playing the faction you choose, such as in mine and Dee's game. I chose the cute little lizard people that their home planet is about to blow up in like 50 years. So you've got 50 years to find somewhere else to live.
Damn.
That's fun.
Wow. Yeah, no, I think I could have some fun headcanon with that. That sounds great. Cool.
I'm sorry, you're going to have to give me a minute. I accidentally closed my script, so now I don't have the show closer, so I'm just going to have to hurriedly get that back up.
You guys say, screw it, we're doing it live.
Shit!
Do you remember me last recording when I was like, how do we finish this thing?
Just like, thanks, bye.
Get lost.
I wouldn't mind, but the fact that I do quite detailed notes in preparation for this shit, and then I was just sat there for a second thinking, I'm going to have to close the show off in a minute. Where the fuck's my script? Why the fuck would I have done this?
Just to remind you, you have closed out the show over 60 times over 2 years.
That doesn't mean I know what I'm saying.
We need emergency envelopes. In case you want to end it all written on the envelope outside.
So, hang on, right, I found it. We're good. I'm good.
Okay.
Right. Right, and so with that, I think that's us for this week. We'll be back in hopefully 2 weeks' time. And any topic suggestions for feedback or, just anything, drop us a comment or email us on phenomenutspodcast@gmail.com. We can even give you a shout out if you'd like. Peace out, folks, and we'll see you again soon. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.